America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Levin TV on CRTV.com. I had no idea, as somebody who served in the Reagan administration for 8 years and had, I think, the highest clearance when I was Chief of Staff to the Attorney General, I had no idea when you walk out the door and you're done in government, you get to keep it. I don't remember that. I wasn't read into programs after that. I didn't have to take lie detector tests after that. You go out the door, you're out the door, and that's the end of that. Apparently not. Apparently, if you worked in the Obama administration, you think you have a right to this for the rest of your life. You can call the president a traitor, treasonous, get jobs at CNN and MSNBC, and all is well and good. But all is not well and good. And Rand Paul was right to call out Brennan and Clapper and the rest. The president is right. I hope he pulls their ticket. We need to review it. There's nothing to review. You got these left-wing political hacks, these Obama diehards, who are playing it throughout the media. Before that, they were playing it throughout the most senior levels of our government, law enforcement and intelligence agencies. And now they're out there making a buck or two or three, making the most outrageous statements about a president. Have you ever remembered a former CIA director talking about another president this way? I don't. I don't. They usually just they're out there, they'll provide expert advice and so forth, quiet disagreement, respectful disagreement, but not like Brennan, Gus Hall's buddy. We did our whole show on him and his background, and I still suspect him. Maybe he is a mouthpiece for Putin. Maybe he's the lead in the disinformation campaign. He was pushing that dossier with the unverified Russian allegations with Harry Reid, who then burped it up to Jim Comey and so forth. This guy Brennan, his number needs to be called, that's for sure. But anyway, so the president's looking at this, and you get the usual howls from the pseudo-media that is CNN, the pseudo-media that is MSNBC and the rest of them, that this is a dictatorship. What's a dictatorship? If you pull the security clearances from former Obama appointees who are calling you a traitor, that's a dictatorship? How so? They shouldn't have these clearances anyway. They're not stable. First of all, they're not stable. But as I will demonstrate with a number of these people, one to the next, they should never have had a security clearance, period. Some of them should have been prosecuted, quite frankly. Anyway, so Sarah Huckabee Sanders is, of course, she's up there at the podium dealing with the gaggle of pseudo-media types about this issue. Are you going to pull the clearances of these wonderful, magnificent patriots, one of whom voted for a communist? Let's see how that went. CNN, go.
Senator Rand Paul today made a strong attempt to vitiate the credibility of former CIA Director John Brennan, saying that he's, and I quote, monetizing his security clearance and that it should be removed from him. He even called on the president to do this. Will the president consider Senator Paul's suggestion and call for the removal of former Director Brennan's security clearance?
Not only is the president looking to take away Brennan's security clearance, he's also looking into the clearances of Comey, Clapper, Hayden, Rice, and McCabe.
You go, girl. You go, girl. Almost all of them are leakers. You know, they shouldn't have these clearances anyway. Go ahead.
Is exploring the mechanisms to remove security clearance because they've politicized and in some cases monetized their public service and security clearances. Making baseless accusations of improper contact with Russia or being influenced by Russia against the president is extremely inappropriate, and the fact that people with security clearances are making these baseless charges provides inappropriate legitimacy to accusations with zero evidence.
Isn't the president doing exactly what you just said the president doesn't want all these people doing? Politicizing matters of national security by going after his...
This is the kind of stupidity we have to deal with. Isn't the president doing exactly what you said, politicizing national security? No, he's not doing exactly what he says. He's not calling these people treasonous. He's not on TV every day attacking each one of them. He's defending himself against them. But go ahead.
Political enemies?
No, the president's not making baseless accusations of improper contact with a foreign government and accusing the president of the United States of treason.
Let's just stop a second. Let me tell this pseudo-reporter something. They're not in office anymore. They're not public officials anymore. They don't need to be read into the most secrets that we have. They're private citizens. They're hacks. They're out. The president is the commander-in-chief. Now, that reporter may not realize this, but he was elected under our constitutional system, and he's responsible for the executive branch, everything, including security clearances. So he's the president. He gets to make these decisions. Clapper, Brennan, Comey, they don't get to make these decisions. Go.
Activity when you have the highest level of security clearance, when you're the person that holds the nation's deepest.
Why should they have it? Why should Brennan have the highest level of security clearance now? It's not his job to run the CIA. How about Clapper? That guy walks into a wall 4 times a day. Why should he have the highest clearance there is? He's the director of national intelligence. He was. He's not in public office anymore. Comey, he's a leaker. He's not in public office anymore. How dare that phony pseudo-reporter compare the president to them? This is part of the problem. Go ahead.
Most sacred secrets at your hands, and you go out and you make false accusations against the president of the United States. He thinks that is a...
What, you mean the president didn't commit treason? He shouldn't be tried for treason and then hanged if he's guilty? Capital offense? Oh, that Brennan, he's got his wits together, doesn't he? Go ahead.
Thing to be very concerned with, and we're exploring what those options are and what that looks like.
I don't know how she puts up with it, but she's really good. She's steady. And, you know, as you know, we spoke to her father at length on the Fox News program, Life, Liberty, and Levin on Sunday. He couldn't be more proud. He doesn't react like I do. He says, I watch her and I say, you know, that reporter just asked a stupid question. They better be ready to get slapped around by her. So he's probably right. Now, on Fox News, Trump's looking into revoking the security clearances of Brennan and other top officials. And again, I'm amazed that they still have them. I didn't understand that still took place. Go.
There you've got the liberal media in a frenzy over the president's plan to perhaps yank security clearances from about half a dozen ex-Obama officials. But our next
Let's
guest...
stop right there. What a lovely group. I'll get into more soon. James Comey, leaker. James Clapper, perjury. John Brennan, surveilling Senate staffers. Andrew McCabe under criminal investigation, leaker. Susan Rice, liar about unmasking, and Hayden's irrelevant. Go ahead.
says this is a suitable response that could prevent them from ever working in government again.
Here with more is retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Greg Schaefer. Greg, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be
welcome.
here.
Why do you think that this is something that the president can do or should do?
Well, first of all, there are three ways an individual can lose a security clearance. First, upon the determination of the issuing agency, they can revoke it. The second means is by national security interest. And the third, because the president does have final authority on all national security matters and security clearances, he can unilaterally then revoke a security clearance. However, he should be able to identify a specific offense which justifies revoking the revocation of that clearance.
Sure. And Greg,
did a pretty good job. The problem is they're not in government anymore. There's no reason for them to have the clearances, period. That's reason enough. Go ahead.
Apparently it was suggested by Rand Paul a couple of days ago because Mr. Brennan referred to the president's conduct in Helsinki as treasonous. Given what you have seen, do these officials deserve to have the security clearance yanked?
Well, again, having a security clearance is not a right, it's a privilege. And in the federal government, that privilege has to be renewed every 5 years. If the president can identify, again, a specific offense why he should revoke the security clearance, by all means do it. But at the same time, you got to keep in mind that just because they have a clearance does not mean they still have access to classified material. That doesn't exist.
All right, so then why have a clearance? I mean, to me, he's making the argument, and he's trying to be a straight arrow, and I'm all for that. But I'm saying, if they don't have access to the information, then why get the clearance? They're not in government. Why get the clearance? If they're going to use the imprimatur of having clearance, of having been a senior intel officer, as an example, or executive, in order to accuse the president of treason and things like that, why have the clearance? It is a privilege. It ought to be yanked. There's absolutely no reason for it. Now, Clapper, he was on CNN, as you might expect, and he was asked about this. he thought it was really uncalled for. Go ahead.
Mr. Clapper, you are apparently now on a list, according to the White House, as of 2 minutes ago. They would like to revoke your security clearance. How do you feel about that?
Wow, what a reporter. How do you feel about that, Clapper? That's not the kind of question you should ask. How about this? Why do you have a security clearance, Mr. Clapper? What does that entail, Mr. Clapper? Have you abused your security clearance in the past, Mr. Clapper? Does the president have the legal right to withdraw your security clearance? Now, hey, how do you feel about that, Jim? Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of interesting news. I'm reading it and learning about it just as you are. I think it's, off the top of my head, it's kind of a sad commentary where, for political reasons, this is kind of a petty way of retribution, I suppose, for speaking out against...
No, it's not. You shouldn't have your clearance. You left the government. You're a knucklehead. You're out there making outrageous statements. And the rules apply to you too, pal. Go ahead.
President, which I think are on the part of all of us, are born out of genuine concerns about President Trump.
Sarah Sanders, one of the words she used, I'll just fill you in as you're getting this information, she referred to you guys all as politicizing, and that you've monetized, essentially monetized your security clearance by, you along with a number of these other folks on the screen come on TV, paid contributor, with the security clearance to say how you feel about the president. And they don't like it, apparently.
Well, the security clearance has nothing to do with how I or any of us feel about...
What? See, this intrepid reporter, this phony. Mr. Clapper, why do you have a security clearance? Why do you have one now? Isn't that a rational question? And what would you do with it? You're downplaying it anyway. Why do you need a security clearance? Why should somebody, unless you're still working for the intelligence agencies of the federal government, which you're not, then why do you need it? There's no reason in the world that you need it. Go ahead.
The president. And I don't get clearance briefings. I don't have access to any classified information.
Then what's the problem? I don't know anything. Like the guy on Schultz in that old 1960. I know nothing. Okay, you know nothing? Then why do you need the clearance? Because I think it's petty. Anything to attack Trump, But wouldn't the reporter circle back and say, well, then why do you need it? No, she doesn't do that. Go ahead.
Frankly, more of a courtesy that former senior officials in the Intelligence Committee are extended a courtesy of...
Now stop there. This is why I would never go on 60 Minutes. See that close-up of this guy? They're right into the nostril. Who wants to see this, quite frankly? You're thinking it. I know you're thinking it. I'm thinking it. Go ahead.
The security clearance haven't had occasion to use it, and it would not, has no bearing...
Shut up, you idiot. He's rambling, babbling. That's what he does best. Now, let's talk about Clapper briefly, shall we? Here's a piece in the Washington Examiner by Stephen Nelson. Former Intelligence Chief James Clapper, now this is from March 11, 2018, rather recently, is poised to avoid charges for allegedly lying to Congress after 5 years of apparent inaction by the Justice Department. It's a liar, under oath. For the rest of us, we'd be charged with perjury. Can you imagine if Mueller had this? He'd be in solitary confinement in Sing Sing for the next 812 years. Clapper, Director of National Intelligence from 2010 to 2017, admitted giving clearly erroneous, quote-unquote, testimony about mass surveillance in March 2013 and offered differing explanations for why. Now, that should have been enough for him. He should have been fired, security clearance pulled, and all the rest of it. 2 criminal statutes that cover lying to Congress have 5-year statutes of limitations establishing a Monday deadline, remember this is March, to charge Clapper, who in retirement has emerged as a leading critic of President Trump. Well, why shouldn't he continue to get his clearance, huh? The under oath untruth, a.k.a. perjury, was exposed by National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden, who sparked national debate on surveillance policy with leaks to the press. Many members of Congress, mostly Republicans, supportive of new limits on electronic surveillance. Isn't that amazing? Democrats don't favor new limits on electronic surveillance. Now we know why. Busy surveilling the Trump campaign. Called for Clapper to be prosecuted as the deadline neared, saying unpunished perjury jeopardizes the ability of Congress to perform oversight. Justice Department spokeswoman Nicole Navas-Oxman declined to comment on Clapper or how perjury cases typically would be handled, saying in an email, quote, "No comment or information to be provided," unquote. Well, thank you for that. Clapper, speaking through a spokesman, declined to comment. Clapper's problematic testimony occurred a few minutes before noon on March 12, 2013, when he told Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat Oregon, "No, sir, and not wittingly," in response to a question about whether the NSA was collecting any type of data at all on millions of Americans. Wyden later said he provided the question to Clapper before the hearing and unsuccessfully asked Clapper to correct the record. Let's reminisce. Can we go down memory lane here for a moment? Let's check this out. Go.
Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Oh, no, stop. It does, and it does so wittingly. So there he is. Caught red-handed, as you would say, as Brennan would say. Caught red-handed. Rubbing his head, staring down, poking up, and he has a security clearance to this day. Go ahead.
There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
An outrageous lie. He didn't even say, look, this is the sort of thing we can talk about in closed sessions. I'm not comfortable talking about these kinds of things now. That's not what he said. Months later, after that, Snowden revealed in June 2013 that the U.S. intelligence community obtained secret court orders forcing phone companies to turn over millions of U.S. call records on an ongoing daily basis, quote unquote. Clapper offered at least two different explanations for his inaccurate testimony. In a June 2013 apology letter, Clapper wrote, well, let's take a look at what Clapper wrote. Go. To the Honorable, well, there's a mistake, Dianne Feinstein, Chairman, Select Committee on Intelligence, 2013. This is from Clapper. Because of the charged rhetoric and heated controversy prompted by my response to a question Senator Ron Wyden asked me last March 12th during an unclassified threat assessment hearing before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, I'm using this direct means of communication with you to set the record straight. Near the end of the hearing, Senator Wyden asked, let's scroll it. We already know what he asked. You heard. I have thought long and hard to recreate what went through my mind at that time. In light of Senator Wyden's reference to dossiers and faced with the challenge of trying to give an unclassified answer about our intelligence collection activities, many of which are classified, I simply didn't think of Section 215 of the Patriot Act. Instead, my answer addressed collection of the content of communications. I focused in particular Section 702 of FISA because we had just been, all right, this is yak, BS. That's what that is. So, I wasn't thinking of this, I was thinking of that, and he was doing his Jackie Mason. That said, I realized that Senator Wyden was asking about Section 215 metadata collection. Is there any question that he was talking about that? Is there any question? Was a section of any statute referred to? Was FISA even mentioned in the context of that question? No. It's a simple question. Have you guys been collecting information on American citizens? Yes or no? Simple question. Well, I didn't know Patriot Act, I had FISA, it was all heated and emotional. No, it wasn't. You're a damnable liar. I realized Wyden was asking about Section 215 metadata collection rather than content collection. Thus, my response was clearly erroneous, for which I apologize. You're a liar, and you lied under oath. And when you lie under oath, it's called perjury. Many lawmakers said they learned of the call, the record Dragnet, from Snowden. That is, the big blanket used to collect all this on the American citizens. The program was ended with 2015 legislation. In addition to the call record program, NSA data collection under Section 702 of FISA which undergirds two large internet surveillance programs, affects data from an unknown number of Americans. Lying to Congress is rarely prosecuted, but there are some recent examples. People are prosecuted for lying to Congress. In March 2017, Clapper said, I can deny Trump's allegation that President Barack Obama wiretapped his calls in Trump Tower. Remember that one? Clapper appearing but they had the FISA. They had the FISA warrant. So while Trump's language was slightly imprecise because he didn't know, I didn't know, but the New York Times suggested there was a wiretap. The truth is they had been surveilling the Trump campaign. We now know there was an informant, right? We now know about the FISA. We know a lot of this. But I can deny, Clapper said, March 2017. March 2017, when I sat right here, pointed to the screen, did exhibit after exhibit after exhibit of public press accounts. He denied it. Appearing on NBC's Meet the Press, said no in response to a question about this FISA court order. Let's check that out again. Go.
Let me start with the president's tweets yesterday. This idea that maybe President Obama ordered an illegal wiretap of his offices. If something like that happened, would this be something you would be aware of?
I would certainly hope so. I can say, obviously I can't speak officially anymore, but I will say that for the part of the national security apparatus that I oversaw as DNI, there was no such wiretap activity mounted against the president-elect at the time, or as a candidate, or against his campaign.
So that means he didn't know about the dossier. He didn't know about the application to the FISA court. He didn't know about the probable cause argument and the issuance of a warrant by the FISA judge. He didn't know any of these things. That is BS. There he is lying again. Go.
For other Title III authorized entities in the government, or a state or local entity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if the FBI, for instance, had a FISA court order of some sort for a surveillance, would that be information you would know or not know?
Yes.
You would be told.
Oh, he would know. Now, he would know. This is months after the warrant is issued by the FISA court. He would be told. Because why would he be told? Because a FISA warrant relates to counterintelligence activity, national security activity. It's not a law enforcement act per se. So he would be in the loop. He's the director of national intelligence. After 9/11, that job was created. It's an umbrella, and he sits at the top. So he's supposed to know what's going on in the intelligence community or anything related to intelligence activity. So of course he would know about it. He said he would know, and he denied it. Go ahead.
Would know that.
If there was a FISA court order
Yes.
on something like this.
Something like this, absolutely.
And at this point, you can't confirm or deny whether that exists?
I can deny it.
There is no FISA court order?
Not to my knowledge.
Of anything at Trump Tower?
No.
Well, that's an important revelation at this point.
Absolutely deceiving. Absolutely. There wasn't a wire on an actual wiretap, but that's just semantics. Whether it's Trump Tower per se, that's just semantics. He knew all this other stuff that was going on, and he lies. That's what he does. So no, he should not have his security clearance as far as I'm concerned, and he shouldn't have had one after he lied to Congress. He should have been charged, but somehow these guys get away with it. He wasn't charged. All right, now let's take a look at a brief history of the CIA's unpunished spying on the Senate. This would be John Brennan, who has a security clearance. You know, the guy on TV who is absolutely out of his mind. Here's a piece from The Atlantic, and I could have picked a piece from multiple newspapers and other sources. Now, this is December 23, 2014. A statement issued Thursday morning by a CIA spokesman said that John O. Brennan, the agency's director, had apologized to Mrs. Feinstein and the committee's ranking Republican, Senator Saxby Chambliss of Georgia, and would set up an internal accountability board to review the issue. What issue? Get to that in a minute. The statement said that the board, which will be led by former Democratic Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana, could recommend a potential disciplinary measure and steps to address systemic issues. But anger among lawmakers grew throughout the day, leaving a nearly 3-hour briefing about the report in a Senate conference room. Members of both parties called for the CIA officers to be held accountable. and some said they had lost confidence in Mr. Brennan's leadership. This is a serious situation, and there are serious violations, said Mr. Chambliss, generally a staunch ally of the intelligence community. He called for the CIA employees to be dealt with very harshly. Last week, the article goes on, the Internal Accountability Board announced the results of its review. If you followed the impunity with which the CIA has broken U.S. laws throughout its history, it writes, gee, The Atlantic is a liberal publication. So when Trump the other week was questioning the intelligence agencies, the liberals jumped him. And yet look at this. You'll be unsurprised to learn that no one is going to be dealt with very harshly after all. A panel investigating the CIA's search of a computer network used by staff members of the Senate Intelligence Committee who were looking into the CIA's use of torture will recommend against punishing anyone involved in the episode, the New York Times reports. The panel will make that recommendation after the 5 CIA officials who were singled out by the agency's Inspector General this year for improperly ordering and carrying out the computer searches staunchly defended their actions, saying they were lawful, and in some cases done at the behest of John Brennan, the CIA director. John Brennan was spying on staff members to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Got that? And he's out there calling the president all kinds of names. Done at the behest of Brennan, who once feigned ignorance about the actions in question, so he lied to cover it up, going so far as to declare them beyond the scope of reason, while effectively rejecting the most significant conclusions of the Inspector General's report. The story continues. The panel appointed by Mr. Brennan and composed of 3 CIA officers and 2 members from outside the agency is still expected to criticize agency missteps that contributed to the fight with Congress. Gee, I hope so. Who'd have guessed that a panel appointed by Brennan to look into malfeasance presided over and in some cases ordered by Brennan would decide that neither Brennan nor any of the people Brennan leads should be held accountable? Brennan and the CIA have behaved indefensibly, but substantial blame belongs to the overseers who permitted them to do this with impunity, including figures in the Obama administration, right up to the president and Senate Intelligence Committee members who, for all their bluster, have yet to react to CIA misbehavior in a way that actually disincentivizes similar malfeasance in the future. And it goes on. Mr. Brennan, spying on the Senate Intelligence Committee, for which he was never punished, among other lies. Then he lies to cover it up. The president wants to yank his security clearance, too. The president is doing a lot of cleanup where Obama did not. You notice with Comey the liar, he had to fire him because Obama kind of liked the liar and the leaker. Brennan lying to Congress and then having ordered the surveillance of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Clapper having lied to Congress under oath about surveillance of hundreds of millions of Americans. It's just really quite appalling. Now let's go to Susan Rice, who, believe it or not, still has a security clearance. TheFederalist.com, David Harsanyi, back in September of last year. On March 22 of 2017, Representative David Nunes made his ham-fisted disclosure, this is how this fellow writes about it, that the Obama administration had conducted incidental surveillance, collection, and unmasking of Trump administration officials. It was a revelation that ignited widespread criticism from nearly every corner of Washington. I have seen intelligence reports that clearly show that the president-elect and his team were, I guess, at least monitored, he said. Looks to me like it was all legally collected, but it was essentially a lot of information on the president-elect and his transition team and what they are doing. Nunes went on to claim that the information was spread across a number of agencies and had little or no apparent intelligence value. Perhaps Nunes' reasons were partisan, he writes. Perhaps his framing was exaggerated. We'll see, and we now know it wasn't. But if CNN's reporting is correct, everything Nunes claimed that day was basically true, which is a lot more than we can say for others. On that same day, former